Dispatcher. 911, what is your emergency? Female voice. He's resetting the perimeter locks. He doesn't know I'm on the phone. Please. He thinks he bypassed the system. Dispatcher. Ma'am, stay with me. Are you safe to leave the property? Female voice. No. The doors won't open. He changed the network codes. Oh my God, he's coming down the hall. Witness. We were just putting the trash bins out. Suddenly, the whole smart lighting system on his house flashed deep red. Then, 3 distinct pops. Bam, bam, bam. I told my wife, those aren't firecrackers. That's a high-caliber weapon. Suspect. Detectives, look at my professional background. I build secure digital infrastructure for a living. If I wanted to eliminate an intruder in my own domestic domicile, I wouldn't leave a forensic trail. I am literally the smartest man in this room. This was a textbook case of justified self-defense. Detective. Then explain the background audio, Marcus. Explain exactly what the server uploaded to the cloud at 9:04 p.m. Before the digital trap snapped shut, before the encrypted servers revealed the truth, there was just a beautiful, custom-built smart home on Cloverdale Lane. Back in 2021, life looked flawless for Elena Vance. She was a vibrant, deeply protective mother of 2 who spent her days running a local children's nonprofit. Her friends called her the human thermostat. Wherever she walked, she regulated the energy, bringing warmth and calm to everyone around her. Then she married Marcus. Marcus Vance was a master-level network security engineer and federal defense contractor. He was a man obsessed with systems, protocols, and absolute insulation from the outside world. When they bought their isolated 4-bedroom ranch, Marcus personally hardwired the entire property. He installed military-grade biometric locks, hidden smart hub cameras, and an advanced automated security network. He told Elena it was a shield to keep her and the children safe from a dangerous world. But by the winter of 2025, that protective shield had slowly morphed into an invisible digital cage. The rules in the house began to shift. If Elena stayed out 20 minutes late at a charity function, Marcus didn't just ask where she was. He showed her the automated timestamp of her vehicle crossing the geofenced driveway perimeter. If she spoke to her sister on the phone, the smart home audio hubs in the ceiling would subtly hum, a silent reminder that every syllable was being processed through his central server. Elena drew a hard line in the sand. Fix this obsession with control, or the children and I are gone. Marcus promised to adjust. He claimed he was just hyper-vigilant because of his high security clearance. But control is a drug that rarely allows for a casual taper. The final straw dropped when Marcus went away for a 2-week cybersecurity summit in Chicago. For the first time in 4 years, Elena breathed. The constant surveillance haze lifted, and in that quiet, unmonitored clarity, she realized a terrifying truth. She wasn't living with a protective husband. She was living with a captor who was systematically cataloging her life. When Marcus returned, he didn't find a warm meal or an obedient wife. He found an empty house, a stack of signed divorce papers, and an active emergency protection order. Elena had packed up the children and moved into a hidden apartment, cutting off all digital ties. She even bought a secondary encrypted burner phone just to escape his ability to track her location. But Marcus didn't panic. To a high-level systems engineer, a runaway wife wasn't an emotional crisis. It was just a broken code that needed to be rewritten. A glitch in his perfect matrix. He began telling his inner circle a highly specific, deeply weaponized narrative. He claimed Elena was suffering from a severe psychological break, that she was unstable, and that she was the one stalking him, trying to ruin his military standing. He was setting the stage, building his alibi, designing what he truly believed would be the perfect, legally bulletproof crime. Here at Time with X, we frequently decode the deep behavioral architecture behind cases where brilliant minds believe they can outsmart human nature. If you are fascinated by the hidden psychological triggers that turn protectors into apex predators, take a brief moment to hit that subscribe button right now. Together, we look past the headlines and analyze the exact moment the criminal mind implodes. By late autumn, the legal battle had reached a boiling point. The court order explicitly stated that Marcus was entirely barred from contacting Elena, and he was only permitted to see the children under strict third-party supervision. Yet, Marcus remained completely calm. He told his legal team he had high-definition exterior Nest footage proving Elena was routinely trespassing on his property to spy on him. He claimed he was building an airtight case to strip her of custody permanently. He was so incredibly confident because he believed he owned the narrative. He believed he controlled every single byte of data entering and leaving that house. But on the rainy evening of November 12th, the absolute breaking point arrived. According to emergency logs, Marcus was dropped off at the house by a colleague after a night of heavy drinking, a vice he hid behind his clean-cut, professional persona. Frustrated, lonely, and losing his grip on his domestic empire, he decided to force Elena's hand. He bypassed the custody app entirely and used a spoofed number to send a single, devastating text message to her secondary phone. The text message claimed that their youngest son had left his lifelong medical inhaler inside the master bedroom lockbox, and that if she didn't come retrieve it immediately, he would dispose of it. It was a classic high-friction trap, and like a fierce, instinctive mother, Elena's protective programming overrode her caution. She didn't wait for a police escort. She hopped into her car in her sweatpants, dialed 911 on her speakerphone, and drove straight into the spider's web. When she pulled up to the dark ranch house, the automated floodlights clicked on, bathing her car in a blinding white glare. She stepped out, keeping the line to the emergency dispatcher active but hidden in her pocket. She walked up the front steps and pushed open the heavy door. Inside, the house was pitch black, save for the blue, rhythmic glow of the central server stack humming in the hallway. Marcus was standing right there in the darkness, but he wasn't holding an inhaler. He was holding a loaded, tactical firearm. Marcus looked at her, smiled calmly, and said, "You just violated a lawful boundary, Elena, and out here, I am the law." What Marcus completely forgot, what the smartest man in the room totally overlooked in his absolute arrogance, was a singular, automated network protocol he had programmed into his own system 3 years prior. A protocol that was, at that very microsecond, waking up in the dark. The cold air inside the foyer felt entirely wrong. It didn't smell like a home. It smelled like ozone, static electricity, and old copper. Elena stood just 3 steps past the threshold, her hands trembling inside the pockets of her fleece pajamas. The heavy, solid oak door clicked shut behind her, with a definitive, automated metallic snap. It was the sound of a deadbolt locking under remote command. Marcus didn't move. He stood by the kitchen counter, backlit by the blinking blue status LEDs of his hardwired server hub. In his right hand, resting loosely against his thigh, was a matte black Kimber .45 semi-automatic handgun. "Elena, where is the inhaler, Marcus? The boys are in the car with my sister. Let me take the medicine, and I'm out of here." "Marcus, you always think you can just breeze in and out of my infrastructure, Elena. You think a piece of paper signed by a county judge changes the fact that this property, this air, and everything inside these walls belongs to my ecosystem?" But Marcus didn't realize that deep inside Elena's left pocket, her secondary phone was warm. The screen was blacked out, but the connection was wide open. On the other end of the line, a dispatcher in a sterile county emergency room was listening to every single heartbeat of the conversation. "Elena, I came for our son's medicine. You put your hands on me the last time I came here, Marcus. I have that on video. I am not doing this with you tonight. Open the door." "Marcus, you're trespassing. Look at you. Coming into my house uninvited, screaming, making demands. You're unstable, Elena. Everyone knows it. I've already documented it." "Elena, I am not screaming. You lied about the inhaler. You used a spoofed number to circumvent the court-ordered communication block." On the 911 audio log, the ambient noise suddenly shifts. There is the sharp, distinct sound of a physical struggle, the friction of cotton fabric rubbing violently against tactical nylon. Marcus had lunged forward, grabbing her left wrist with immense physical leverage, trying to force her away from the exit corridor and deeper into the kitchen space. "Elena, get your hands off me." "Marcus, stop. I'm leaving. I am trying to get my kids' stuff so I can get out of here." "Elena." He grabbed me and tried to push me into the kitchen. "I have it on video." Dispatcher. "Elena. Elena, I'm tracking your ping. Does he have any weapons inside the residence?" "Elena. Yes, he has a gun. It's somewhere in the house, probably on the mantle or the kitchen table." Dispatcher. Is he threatening you with it right now, ma'am? Elena. No, he's blocking the exit. Marcus, please let me go. Hello? Hello? But then, the open line picked up a sound that veteran dispatchers recognize with absolute horror. It wasn't an argument anymore. It was the sharp, metallic slide rack of a semi-automatic handgun chambering around. Outside, across the damp asphalt of Cloverdale Lane, the neighbors were completely oblivious. One resident was out back by his garage, working on a wood-burning stove, listening to the quiet rustle of the wind through the pines. Suddenly, a massive, unnatural sound shattered the neighborhood calm. Pop. The neighbor paused, his hand freezing on a piece of split oak. He looked toward his sister, who was standing near a white pickup truck in the driveway. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Must be a firecracker left over from the holidays. But before she could answer, 3 more devastating sounds tore through the night in rapid, calculated succession. Bam, bam, bam. "No," the neighbor whispered, his blood turning to ice. "That wasn't a firecracker. Those are gunshots." Before he could even process the thought, the front door of the dark ranch house swung open. Marcus Vance walked out onto the porch, silhouetted by the brilliant white glare of his automated security floodlights. He didn't look like a man who had just engaged an intruder in a desperate struggle for survival. He walked with a slow, deliberate pace, his arms swinging loosely at his sides. He stood right in the center of his concrete driveway and bellowed into the darkness, his voice echoing off the surrounding houses. "Shoot her in the head! Shoot her in the absolute head, you miserable bitch!" The neighbor ran to the edge of his property line, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Marcus, what did you do? What the hell did you just do?" Marcus didn't run. He didn't look for a vehicle to escape. Instead, he slowly dropped down onto his knees right on the cold, wet pavement. He locked his fingers behind his head, leaned forward, and looked directly at his neighbor with wide, unblinking eyes. "Marcus, call the police. Fucking shoot me right now. Shoot me in the face." I had to terminate the threat. Within 4 minutes, Cloverdale Lane was completely swallowed by a sea of flashing blue and red emergency lights. 4 tactical cruisers screamed around the corner, their tires screeching against the wet pavement. Officers jumped from their vehicles with long guns drawn, their tactical flashlights cutting through the autumn mist. "Get on the ground. Get on the absolute ground. Keep your hands where we can see them." Marcus remained entirely stationary, his fingers still locked behind his head. "Marcus, the primary threat inside the domestic domicile has been neutralized. The weapon is unloaded on the living room mantel. I have surrendered my perimeter." As the cuffs ratcheted tightly around Marcus's wrists, a secondary team of officers stacked up against the front door. Their heavy tactical boots pounded up the wooden steps. "Police department. Breaching. Breaching." The first officer delivered a powerful kick directly to the frame of the front door, splintering the oak lock set. They swarmed into the dark hallway, their weapons clearing the left and right sectors of the kitchen. "Clear right. Check the basement stairs. We've got a downed female in the main living space. Gunshot wound to the cranial region. Call for immediate medical intercept." But when the flight medics arrived and knelt over Elena's body in her fleece pajamas, there was nothing they could do. The mama bear had been completely silenced on the floor of a house she once thought would be her forever sanctuary. She had walked directly into the jaws of a predator to protect her children, and she had paid the ultimate price. The immediate physical threat was neutralized, and Marcus Vance was loaded into the back of a secure transport van. As the vehicle pulled away from Cloverdale Lane, Marcus looked back at his perfectly engineered smart home through the wire mesh of the window. He was smiling subtly. In his mind, he had already won. He had built a flawless self-defense narrative. He had eliminated his primary source of friction, and he was completely certain that his security infrastructure would back up his story perfectly. But what Marcus didn't know, what his brilliant mathematical brain had completely missed, was that the digital trap he had built wasn't recording Elena's trespass. It was currently cataloging the exact evidence that would condemn him to a lifetime inside a concrete cell. Before the digital trap snapped shut on the night of November 12th, the house at 412 Cloverdale Lane was marketed as the ultimate fortress of modern security, a 2,400 square foot promise of safety engineered by one of the most brilliant network security minds in the federal defense sector. Elena Vance, vibrant, deeply protective mother of two, and a beloved coordinator at the local community center, didn't initially see the architecture of her own home as a threat. Then she married Marcus, and the home began to grow eyes. Military-grade biometric locks, hidden smart hub cameras in every ceiling, and a central server that logged every movement, every door opening, and every whispered conversation. By the winter of 2025, that protective shield had morphed into an invisible digital cage. Elena's every move was cataloged by a man who treated his family like a network to be managed. Elena drew a hard line in the sand. Fix this obsession with control, or the children and I are gone. She filed for a temporary separation and changed the locks that Marcus had programmed himself. For the first time in 4 years, Elena breathed. The cameras were supposedly disabled. The server was supposed to be dark. She was reclaiming her domestic domicile. When Marcus returned, he didn't find a warm meal. He found an active emergency protection order and an empty foyer. Elena had moved on. But Marcus was incapable of being logged out. Marcus didn't panic. He saw the situation as a glitch in his perfect matrix, something to be debugged. He was setting the stage, building his alibi, designing what he believed would be the perfect crime. By late autumn, the legal battle had reached a boiling point. Custody hearings were scheduled for the morning of November 13th. Marcus knew the evidence against his character was mounting. He was dropped off by a colleague after a night of heavy drinking, or so he wanted the records to show. He needed to be seen as intoxicated, vulnerable, and reacting to a sudden intrusion. He bypassed the custody app entirely and sent a direct text. The message claimed their youngest son had left his inhaler in the master bedroom lockbox, and Marcus was too drunk to find it. It was a classic high-friction trap. Like a fierce, instinctive mother, Elena's protective programming overrode her caution. She didn't wait for a police escort. She drove back to Cloverdale Lane, believing her son's health was on the line. When she pulled up to the dark ranch house, the automated floodlights caught her in their clinical white glare. She stepped inside. The foyer was silent, except for the rhythmic blue pulse of the server rack in the hallway. Marcus was standing right there in the darkness. He wasn't holding an inhaler. He was holding a loaded, tactical firearm. He told her, "You just violated a lawful boundary, Elena, and out here, I am the law." But Marcus Vance had overlooked a singular, automated network protocol he had programmed into his own system 3 years prior. The protocol was waking up in the dark, and it had been recording everything. The cold air inside the foyer felt entirely wrong. As the heavy front door snapped shut with an automated metallic finality, Elena realized she wasn't just in her former home. She was in a kill box. In his right hand, resting loosely against his thigh, was a matte black Kimber .45. Marcus didn't raise it immediately. He didn't need to. The digital locks were already engaged. He owned the air inside the room. On the other end of the line, a dispatcher in a sterile county emergency room was listening to every single heartbeat of the conversation. Elena had dialed 911 before she even stepped out of the car. Then, the silence broke. The sharp, distinct sound of a physical struggle erupted in the foyer. Marcus lunged. Elena fought. And then, the unmistakable, cold metallic slide of a handgun chambering a round. Outside, across the damp asphalt of Cloverdale Lane, a neighbor was stacking wood. He heard it. A singular pop, followed by 3 rapid, clinical cracks. Then, the neighborhood went deathly quiet. Marcus Vance walked out onto the porch. He didn't run. He didn't scream for help. He bellowed into the empty street. "Shoot her in the head! Shoot her in the absolute head, you miserable bitch!" He knelt on his own driveway, waiting for the cavalry he knew was coming. He was a man who had successfully managed a system failure. In his mind, the threat had been neutralized. The documentation was already written. Within 4 minutes, Cloverdale Lane was swallowed by red and blue strobes. Tactical units moved in formation. Marcus surrendered his perimeter with the clinical detachment of a man filing a network report. Police breached the front door. They found the heavy scent of gunpowder and a woman lying in the foyer. The mama bear had been silenced in the very fortress she once called home. Elena Vance had walked directly into the jaws of a predator to protect her children, and she had paid the ultimate price. Marcus Vance looked back at his house and smiled. In his mind, he had already won. But the digital trap wasn't recording Elena's trespass. It was cataloging the exact evidence that would condemn Marcus to a lifetime inside a concrete cell. The system he built to control her was now building the case against him. The interrogation room at the precinct was cold, sterile, and designed to break men much tougher than Marcus Vance. But Marcus wasn't broken. He was waiting. He was the smartest man in the room. Marcus had lawyered up immediately, but silence is a heavy weight for a narcissist. He wanted to speak. He needed to control the narrative. He needed to explain the structural inefficiency of the investigation. Marcus paused. His pupils dilated slightly, the first microtell of structural friction. He was explaining his advanced security network, unaware that he was handing over the keys to his own prison. The interrogation reached its peak. Detective Harris leaned in and asked the question Marcus had been waiting for. "But what exactly did you do to defend your person against a woman you claim was slapping at your chest?" If you are watching this right now on Time with X, you're seeing a man who believed his tactical self-defense matrix made him untouchable. Was this expertise or pure narcissism? Let us know in the comments. Harris pulled a fresh piece of paper from his folder. "Marcus, do you know what an open line is?" The question was a trap door. Elena's 911 call had stayed open for 14 minutes and 32 seconds. The smartest man in the room had forgotten the one system he couldn't control. The server recorded the truth. The open line captured the reality, and the detective was about to give Marcus Vance's alibi the final push. Marcus Vance stared at the dispatch log, his chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow cycles. For the first time since he had been placed in the back of the patrol unit, his cold, clinical composure began to visibly fray at the edges. The blue ink on the paper before him documented an unyielding truth. Elena hadn't snuck into his house to stalk him. She was on the phone with law enforcement the entire time she crossed his perimeter. This data is clearly corrupted," Marcus stammered, his voice losing its authoritative cadence. "It doesn't capture the physical reality of her movements inside the infrastructure. It doesn't prove she wasn't a threat." Detective Harris reached into his pocket and pulled out a cheap blue ballpoint pen, sliding it across the metal table toward the suspect. "Marcus, you're a systems guy. You like diagrams. Draw it for me. Walk me through the exact layout of your house so I can understand how a self-defense shooting occurs in a 1,000 square foot ranch." Marcus grabbed the pen with trembling fingers. He leaned over the legal pad, his technical instincts taking over as he began to sketch out the architectural footprint of Cloverdale Lane. "Here is the front door corridor," Marcus muttered, his pen scratching violently against the yellow paper. "Here is the kitchen table where the Kimber .45 was resting. Right next to it are the stairs leading down to the basement cavity. The kitchen sink and counters are located right here on the eastern wall." I was standing directly in front of the sink, doing the dishes, when she entered through this vector. Harris leaned in close, studying the drawing. "Okay, so Elena enters the front door. Show me exactly where you met the threat." Marcus drew a sharp, heavy X directly between the kitchen table and the front door entrance. "Right here." She advanced 5 or 6 steps into the interior space. "It's a tight layout." She was completely invading my box. Her intonation was menacing. "She has threatened me multiple times throughout this divorce, saying give me what I want or else." I felt cornered. I didn't feel safe inside my own property. Detective Harris let out a long, slow sigh. He picked up Marcus's drawing, looked at it for a moment, and then shook his head with an expression of profound pity. "Marcus," Harris said, his voice dropping into a chillingly calm register, "let's look at the absolute physical disparity of what you are claiming right now. We processed your intake metrics 2 hours ago. You are 5 foot 9 inches tall. You weigh 194 pounds. You are a trained military veteran and a National Guardsman. Do you know what Elena's autopsy file states?" Marcus remained entirely silent, his eyes glued to the yellow legal pad. "Elena was 4 foot 11 inches tall," Harris whispered, slamming his hand flat against the table. "She weighed exactly 94 pounds. You are telling a room full of homicide investigators that a 94-pound mother in her pajamas, standing next to an open exit door, made a 200-pound trained soldier feel so physically cornered that he had no choice but to pick up a high-caliber firearm and fire 4 distinct rounds directly into her skull? Physical mass does not dictate tactical intent," Marcus snapped, his face flushing deep crimson. "She was aggressive. She was throwing slaps. You weren't in that room, Detective. You don't know how dark it was." "No, I wasn't in that room," Harris said smoothly. "But do you know who was in that room, Marcus? Do you know who witnessed the entire sequence from less than 15 feet away?" Marcus froze, his breath catching in his throat. "Your oldest son," Harris said, the words landing like sledgehammers. "He didn't sleep through the incident. He didn't stay in the rear bedroom vector. He was standing right at the edge of the hallway corridor. He watched his mother walk into that kitchen in her pajamas to get his inhaler, and he watched his father pull a weapon out from behind his back and execute her while she was backing away toward the exit. That little boy is being a complete grown man at his age right now in our intake wing, and he has completely destroyed your entire self-defense fable." He's a child," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking as his psychological defenses began to totally implode. "He was terrified. He's misinterpreting the tactical parameters of the struggle." "He didn't misinterpret anything, Marcus," Harris countered, leaning forward until he was just inches from the suspect's face. "And this brings us back to the smartest man in the room. You see, you spent 3 years building an advanced smart home infrastructure because you wanted absolute control over your environment. You thought you were genius enough to delete the local doorbell logs after the shooting to make it look like she snuck in, but you forgot the most basic protocol of your own architecture." Harris pulled out a final, encrypted digital storage drive and set it down on the metal table. "When you personal wired that house, you set up an automated security protocol for your high-clearance defense work," Harris said, a grim smile spreading across his lips. "Whenever a hardwired perimeter lock is remotely changed while an active cellular device is broadcasting inside the geofence, the central server hub automatically triggers an emergency system mirror. It doesn't cache it to your phone app, Marcus. It bypasses your local phone entirely and uploads an uncompressed, unedited audio-video stream directly to an off-site federal cloud mirror." The room fell into an absolute suffocating silence. Marcus Vance stared at the digital drive, his jaw hanging slightly open. The system engineer had built a trap so perfectly sealed that he had completely forgotten his own code was designed to catch an insider threat. The very network he had used to terrorize and monitor his wife had spent the final minutes of her life recording his arrogant voice, his calculated movements, and the brutal reality of his actions. "Gentlemen," Marcus whispered, his voice suddenly sounding tiny, hollow, and utterly broken. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes darting frantically around the cold room. I think we are entirely done here for the morning. I need to get some sleep. I need to do a little bit of praying. It really sucks that I can't get a freaking blanket or a pillow in this cell, but there are some things I need to process. I'm done talking. Harris stood up slowly, grabbing his legal pad and his pen. We're done too, Marcus. We don't need another word from you. Your own house has already said everything we need to hear. As the heavy steel door of the interrogation room slammed shut, locking the smartest suspect in the county inside his own digital grave, the narrative was already moving toward its final, absolute destination. But the absolute peak of shock wouldn't arrive until the jury heard the hidden audio file Marcus thought he had erased from existence. When the state of Michigan versus Marcus Vance officially went to trial in January of 2025, the defense team faced a steep, insurmountable hill to climb. They didn't just have to overcome the unyielding physical metrics of the crime scene. They had to actively fight the cold, arrogant words of their own client. The courtroom sat in absolute, suffocating silence as the prosecution played the uncompressed audio recovered from the automated federal cloud mirror. The jury didn't just hear the gunshots. They heard Marcus's voice through the smart home audio hubs, calmly taunting his dying wife as she lay on the foyer floor, telling her exactly how he had outsmarted the legal system. They watched a young boy take the stand, his voice trembling but resolute, pointing his finger directly at the man who had turned into an absolute monster inside his own home. The jury's deliberation didn't take long. In fact, it took just under 3 hours. Barely enough time for the court officers to catalog the physical evidence folders. The verdict was swift, absolute, and completely unyielding. Guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The judge didn't offer a single microsecond of leniency. The sentence was mandatory. Life in prison without the absolute possibility of parole. The sentence was mandatory. Life in prison without the absolute possibility of parole, locking the system's engineer away inside an analog environment where he would never control a single byte of data for the rest of his natural life. Marcus Vance thought he was the smartest man in the room, completely forgetting that human malice always leaves a permanent footprint. But as the heavy steel doors of the penitentiary closed on the Vance case, an entirely different, arguably more terrifying digital puzzle was actively waking up 300 miles away. Because while Marcus was relying on physical security networks to mask his crime, a young forensic pathologist in Ohio was about to sit down at her home computer, only to realize that her entire digital life had just been perfectly mirrored by someone she had never met. Hello? Is someone casting to my living room TV? The screen keeps displaying a live Google Maps tracker of my exact vehicle route. You missed your turn on Elm Street, Clara. I've been adjusting your route for the last 48 hours. Look out your front window. Back in the spring of 2026, Dr. Clara Thorne was considered one of the elite forensic pathfinders in the Midwest. She spent her days decoding the microscopic trauma left behind on victims of high-profile crimes. She knew exactly how killers hid their tracks. But she had absolutely no idea that for the past 6 months, her own smart home infrastructure wasn't keeping her insulated from the dark world outside. It was actively being weaponized by a brilliant anonymous stalker. It was actively being weaponized by a brilliant anonymous stalker who was using her own medical files to plan her perfect disappearance.